Last episode saw our three spiritually powered classmates get over their infighting long enough to save the day, and all ended up in a crisis straight out of common nightmares, being in their underwear, more or less, at school. Surely these shared emotional highs and lows have fostered a sense of camaraderie and teamwork amongst our cast. We now go live to Seiko's house to confirm. Excellent progress. Lines of communication open, no one needing to guess or assume where the others stand. Good work, team. Actually, I'm kind of serious, though maybe not about the sushi. The episodes since the first arc ended especially have had a lot of misunderstandings, beginning with Momo and Okarun missing each other at lunch and getting in a fight over their embarrassment at the witness teeth-click collision. Aira being inserted into the story at first helps catalyze the reconciliation, as Momo can't stand to see Okarun bullied or mocked, which, if you remember, was the very first thing that brought them together. But her revenge on Aira creates a different misunderstanding when Aira unexpectedly can see her spiritual powers and jumps to the conclusion that she's a demon. That leads to the warehouse encounter where Silky shows up, which is only due to her own misunderstanding that Aira is her child. Aira's rescue romance towards Okarun leads to the scene Momo witnessed and misinterprets, and even resists attempts to clear the air at first. And now that we add the Mantizian being a desperate widower working for his child's life, we also have this long pattern of misunderstanding the antagonistic forces, between the victimized girls that form the crab, Turbo Granny's pattern of showing up where such spirits may need her, and Silky's own awful story. In these and many other scenes, there is this persistent habit that basically every character shares. They are quick to make assumptions, and are willing to act before learning more. Okarun assumes Momo would only talk to someone like him if she was interested in his occult magazine that she flips through, and rushes after her to keep from missing the opportunity to make a friend. Momo assumes that this behavior is why he has no friends, an assumption in itself, since she's not in his class and doesn't even know his name. And both assume that because they have no reason to personally believe in aliens or ghosts, then they must not exist, which is kind of how we got into all this other mess. Aira's chuny belief that she's some kind of main character leads her to assume that the golden ball is a message from the heavens, which leads to assuming Momo is a demon and Silky her familiar, a rather dangerous error, it turns out. But her assumption that she really is the chosen one means that when she gets her own powers, she just interprets it as more proof of what she already believed. And honestly, this is probably why she so easily takes to using Silky's skills. It's also why she assumes she's the group leader, even when no one, including her, acts like it. On the flip side, because of how Aira acts towards everyone at school, ingratiatingly cheerful and friendly, they all have made an assumption about her character that is at odds with reality. Even the crisis of accidentally streaking through school is resolved through assumption, as the nurse's own preoccupation with bullies makes her assume that they were being victimized. They were, really, but Queen Sensei's own interest in, punishment seems like it informs her guesses. An aside, but I appreciate the series' eagerness to make the adults even more colorful characters than the kids, rather than just using them as a sober counterpoint. Anyway, in our main cast, there is kind of a pattern to the things they assume. Okarun's assumptions are often him thinking the worst of himself, such as thinking Momo must be into the occult because why else would she talk to him, assuming she'd stop being his friend if he's weak, assuming sayonara was the right thing to say between them, assuming that Momo was avoiding him at lunch because he's boring, and so on. Aira is basically his opposite then, assuming the best interpretation for herself at every opportunity, even to the point of assuming that her research on romance gave her an accurate picture. Momo then tends to make assumptions about other people, but like Okarun, she seems to default to thinking the worst things first. She assumed he had no friends. She assumed Seiko must be a fake medium in her youth. She assumes Silky is trying to trick them with the offer to save Aira, and of course she assumes that Okarun and Aira are sneaking around when she sees them on the ground. I'm not dunking on Momo, by the way, because all of those things happened when she was in an emotional upheaval. It's a defensive thing she does. All we need now is for the new guy, Gigi, who shows up at the end, to be someone who assumes positive things about other people, and then we will have a complete set. So, where am I going with all this? Well, Something occurred to me during this episode. In the scene where Okarun starts spinning out his grand theory of aliens and yokai powers and why they're caught in the middle, it's a neat idea on its own, neater still for how it helps unify the encounters in the series to this point, though I am amused to point out that it too relies on an assumption that aliens would actually want to invade Earth in the first place. I mean, the Serpoians rather plainly state that they're just after genetic diversity. Anyway, it's not his theory itself, but the attempt at unification. Like, why does something like aliens get put into the same box with other occult things, and UMAs and hauntings and mediums and so on? These things actually exist within this story universe, but it's taking inspiration from reality, from actual alien and ghost lore in our world. And that lore is built from single eyewitness accounts, blurry pictures, unexplained instrument readings or malfunctions, and the rumors which spring and spread from them. Humans take a single encounter which doesn't make sense to them and are willing to extrapolate out a whole cosmology or pseudoscience just to reconcile the incongruity. As a species, we're just deeply afraid of the unknown, and would rather invent heroes or monsters as the culprits, preferring such to letting something remain unnamed or undescribed. We prefer a wild fantasy to a question mark. So I am struck this time to watch the other classmates attempt to figure out why our trio was in such a compromised state at the end of last episode. Aira's friends rescue her from the nurse's office first, and because of Aira's earlier accusation against Momo, they leap to the conclusion that it was her doing. When we catch back up to her in the classroom then, she is happy to play up their sympathies, as it bandages the hit to her reputation that she feared. But the crowd around her takes the suggestion of Momo as culprit and continues to run with it, becoming more outraged at her imagined sins, and even adds in the rumors about her that Aira herself started, finally wondering if they should punish her in some way. We watch in real time as they create a whole narrative about what happened to Aira, repeating the rumors to one another and amplifying the perceived validity of the very story that they are spinning themselves. This is no different than some single indistinct picture of something in the sky being shared, conjectured about, and iterated upon until there's a full-blown alien theory to go along with it, repeated and remixed in magazines like the ones Okarun reads. Sometimes even when the indistinct thing is discovered to be a weather balloon, the appeal of the lore surrounding the unknown remains. In Aira's case, she basically knows it's just a weather balloon. That is, she started the rumors about Momo and knows that she had nothing to do with their attempted abduction. She assumed quite a lot about her at first, even truly fantastical things like her being a demon, but having actually spent time with her has changed matters. Letting this crowd whip themselves into a frenzy and amplify the damaging rumors even further isn't something she can really let happen, knowing the truth. The story lets her lean into her fake nice guy characterization long enough to be consistent, but rescues her from becoming unsympathetic to the audience when she comes clean. I love the way the crowd frames her as they press close around, like increasing pressure as she builds to the decision to tell them the truth, that she started the fake rumors, so please don't speak badly of her. Letting people make assumptions and run with them is fraught with peril, and Aira has enough moral center to take responsibility for her part, even if she is dismayed at her decision just moments later. Another key scene counteracting assumptions takes place before this one. Momo doesn't actually seem bothered at Aira's friends accusing her of being the culprit. As it turns out, something more important is weighing on her mind. Okarun's moment of pleading with her last time, that he doesn't want her to have the wrong idea, was something of a turning point in their battle. Appropriately then, she matches his seriousness by wanting to hear what he will say happened. In the process of clearing it up, he must reveal that he wanted to get in shape in secret. When I made a video that week, I talked about that impulse as a common male fantasy, to unexpectedly become swole or ripped to surprise someone they fancy with the transformation. And though Okarun will go on about it just being a guy thing, Momo seems like she might sniff out the truth, based on her flushed cheeks, uncovering her mouth, and the continued prying. Her willingness to accept a different truth than what she assumed has actually led to another truth coming out. They have a bit of a moment, in fact, before her friends show up. I said last week that my one wish for this episode was to have those two weigh in on the trio streaking, and I should make wishes more often, for they delivered something far beyond what I dreamed possible. A full performance complete with light work, building to the most obvious conclusion. Nude gladiatorial combat. This, of course, is the humorous companion to Aira's classmates following a chain of assumptions to build a story that satisfies that persistent human need, to fill an unknown with an answer, even a crazy, naked gladiatorial one, rather than let it persist as mystery. So, in a long view, this is at least part of what this story is doing. The mysteries surrounding aliens or yokai and the tangle of spotty rumors that describe them form a parallel to the human encounters, where so many are quick to believe their initial assumptions or surface appearances. Actual interaction with the supernatural entities has changed their understanding of them, and often through messy, antagonistic encounters. So too have our characters moved increasingly closer to knowing one another, but frequently do so in contentious ways, or must take the long way around due to misunderstandings. It's a story about encountering mysterious, unknowable entities, such as aliens, yokai, and other people. I like then two encounters in the second part. The first is when Aira has come clean to her class and is cursing herself for an idiot when Momo happens upon her. They aren't friendly, and rather pointedly sit facing away from one another, while Aira insists that she really did blame everything on Momo, lying to avoid admitting what she did. She sits in shadow and Momo in the light, and Momo says she bets Aira didn't actually badmouth her. Aira still insists, but Momo doesn't argue, just lets the statement lie. She, too, better understands Aira at this point, even though almost all of their exchanges have been contentious ones. They're then interrupted by the somehow surviving gig worker, and he joins many of our other antagonists with the backdoor origin story, the second encounter. Turns out it's hard to be a whatever he is, a kappa, I guess, as his wife and child have a terrible disease that requires constant blood replacement. The wife has died already, and the child will soon follow if he cannot earn enough for treatment. But he is weak among his kind, and must stoop to dangerous outlaw gigs like the one that brought them into contact. Despite this, upon seeing that they bandaged and fed him, he is overcome with gratitude, having never before been shown such kindness. He immediately swears he will never harm them again. He curses himself for his weakness, and for the hardship he brought to them and his son, a pathetic and pitiable creature. Hard to stay mad at him in that light, and Okarun is moved to want to help him, even offering his precious weenie. But that's a ridiculous suggestion. After all, he needs a steady work, not a lump sum of cash. Stop trying to make every encounter involve your bits, Okarun. Anyway, the solution is delightfully on brand. Their species having milk for blood, which is really just a way for the story to include another alien lore staple, cattle mutilation, or at least abduction. This is one of the oldest UFO stories, with an example even in the 19th century, and for some reason, a flying saucer tractor beaming up cows became a persistent and repeated image in media. There's just a kind of playful absurdity built into a hyper-advanced spacefaring race coming all the way to Earth to rustle some cattle. The notion is absurd, and the trope itself a kind of gentle mocking of those who believe in such alien lore, because we assume that nothing about a plain old cow would be worth such extraordinary effort. So, of course, Dan invents a very compelling reason an alien would be interested in beaming one up, an unlooked-for miracle to save his dying child. Yet another assumption ends up off base, in a playful, meta way. This is basically a reversal of the pattern I mentioned earlier, where unexplained events lead people to invent fantastical explanations, the origin of much supernatural lore. They have taken that lore and invented a very grounded explanation, at least within the story universe. And if you're going to invoke such a prominent alien meme in your story, you might as well give us the most overproduced tentpole spectacle version you can muster. Too bad it's still not enough to convince Seiko that he's an alien. So, in total, this episode featured multiple examples of people spinning up stories to explain something they didn't understand, multiple examples of characters making their motives plain in contrast to what was assumed about them, and multiple examples of characters demonstrating understanding something about another person that said person did not express directly. Assumptions are made, assumptions are dispelled, and sometimes they take the long way around. It seems then a fine time to introduce another character, who Seiko helpfully points out was Momo's first love. I guess this is the one who mocked her back in childhood. He does seem to have the same hair, and oh no, he glowed up. I'm sure Okarun won't jump to any assumptions about him or Momo, and since this guy mocked Momo over her spirit power practices, I have to imagine she will be sorely tempted to rub her actual powers in his face. And actually, I rather like the synergy of introducing this guy here, because Aira's presence and romantic overtures at Okarun have been putting a lot of pressure on Momo. Turnabout is fair play, so perhaps it's Okarun's turn. Maybe Gigi here has found his other golden ball to really tie things up in a neat bow. Because this series always does things the most simple way, right?